वाहेगुरु 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 वाहेगुरु.
Hello there, Narinder. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Had a busy day?
Yeah, busy. Always busy.
Yeah. Okay, so are we ready to talk about symbology and leadership today?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, brilliant. So in terms of leadership, I know that you're in a leadership position yourself, and very often we see these images in Sikhi. These images must be very familiar to you.
Yeah.
The first image is the image of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. This is the statue erected of him in Lahore, and the titles Singh and Gaur, they kind of make us feel connected with this leader. And then in the middle, we've got the Ekonkar, which is symbolic of oneness and reminds us of how leadership, it's about being connected with everyone, not only those that we feel a strong sense of kinship with, but all of life, actually. And then the third image is of Bandishore, where Sri Guru Hargobind, our sixth Guru, negotiated the release from prison of 52 Hindu Maharajas. They weren't Sikh Maharajas. So it demonstrates humanitarianism. It shows like unconditional support for people who are vulnerable, who need help. So when we think about leadership in our organizations, in education, for example, and sometimes we may be in a context where there might be one or two others who are very similar to ourselves, but the rest, we work in diverse environments, and so we feel this kinship not only because of our racial backgrounds. We may feel kinship based on our values, the values, and so kinship can be based on many things. It's only one thing. And oneness, it's this diversity, not only with other human beings, but all of life, and this humanitarianism. So tell me, what are your thoughts about this in the context of your own leadership in an organization?
I think I do agree with a lot of what you just said there, in terms of like especially the Sikhi values, where there's oneness, there's being selfless as well in our approach to our work, especially when we're interacting, from my perspective, and when I'm interacting with fellow members of staff, if they're going through any kind of difficulty, then I kind of put my seva hat on, and then I'm not necessarily get over involved, but just give them guidance and coaching just to get them out of a difficult situation, or if there's a particular kind of conflict as well. Again, Sikhi is all about being calm and accepting of others and not judging others, and not allowing your ego to get away with you. So those kind of principles and values, because I'm dealing with a number of different characters, be in the work environment in terms of dealing with staff members and then dealing with students, I kind of do take a step back and do sort of identify those values when I'm working day to day. I think especially with ego, when I'm dealing with fellow managers or someone who's senior to me, if I disagree with them on anything, it's not about proving my point is right. It's about making my point and respecting other people's views and opinions. So, I mean, going back to our conversation where I introduced myself last week, I really did start to think about Sikhi and the leadership roles, that Sikhi and leadership, it does really go well together, and it is something that does need to be talked about more. I mean, I know currently in education, when we're looking at business management courses or things like that, when we're teaching students, we very much go on things to do with other theorists, but nothing is very rarely mentioned about Sikhi. And I think Sikhi does have a lot to offer when it comes to leadership, doing things the right way, the honest way, and with integrity. So I do think, it does play a massive part in what I do day to day and how I am as a person in the working environment.
And I know that for both yourself and myself, the EDI, the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion policies, it's and you know we're still struggling to have them implemented. And when we look at Maharaja Ranjit Singh, this is like going back hundreds of years, and he was governing not only over Sikhs, he was governing over Muslims, Christians and Hindus, and created an environment where there was a very high percentage of literacy. Some people say it was almost 90% literacy in those days. And so why is it that we are still kind of struggling to work on like creating diverse curriculums, and you know we're still working on decolonization?
Yeah, I agree, and I think there's two elements there. One element is that people from various communities find it difficult to put their view across, is one, in terms of hitting the right audience, in terms of senior management in education. And then the other element is that those people that are prepared to raise their voice, then we have senior management who aren't prepared to listen.
And when we look at the example of Sri Hargobind Singh Ji, not saying Hargobind Ji, because I always say Singh, but then I realized that Singh, he wasn't called Singh at that time, was he? That came later. But he enabled 52 Maharajas who were very different to him, very different to each other. And that there's that symbolism of hanging on to the tailcoats. It's like, whatever we do, we will empower others to kind of gain the benefit of our altruistic endeavors onto our tailcoats. That's also very deeply symbolic of how we need to be embracing everyone rather than simply those that we feel a strong kinship with, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And then so talking about kinship and oneness, then there's also the deep philosophical concept of egalitarianism. And these three symbols, the langar and seva, you know, that for me they symbolize the langar and seva, where we sit on the floor together with people that that may be from different walks of life, different ranks, different statuses. The langar was created by Guru Nanak to demonstrate the power of equality, I suppose, by breaking through all these taboos, because in those days it was taboo for people from higher caste to eat with those from lower castes. And but here we sit with, we're prepared to sit and eat with strangers, considering the stranger as part of our own family. And then we have Guru Gobind Singh Ji on a horse, where at that time only the ruling classes were allowed to ride horses, but he had followers from all sorts of classes and castes, and they all rode horses. So that was rising above their station. And I use that word deliberately, like rising above our station, because very often when we feel oppressed for, you know, various kind of obstacles are in our way, it's as though it's difficult for us to rise above our station, to break through those ceilings. You know, and then we've got Mai Bago, you know, Mai Bago led 40 men back into battle. And, you know, and that, like, in terms of gender equality, like this is again like 300 years ago, they broke through these oppressive kind of social orders where you had to be a particular gender or a particular caste or, you know, particular rank and file in order to do, you know, in order to be the ruler of your own destiny. And at the same time, we've got egalitarianism, where we're humble, where we're down to earth. So thinking about leadership in our contemporary society, we work in diverse societies, and we know that we're not always seen to be equal. But, you know, we sometimes have to make kind of deep efforts to break these social orders. So how do these two things, how do we remain humble and yet ambitious at the same time.
It's a good point to make and good question as well. And it's a difficult one to do, because like you're dealing with probably all various kinds of sort of like emotional things going on in your head. But if it depends on where your mindset is. If it's that you want to achieve and you're going to go against all the odds and do that, then that's the route an individual will take. But if your mindset is in terms of following sort of like history and what our gurus did in times of difficulty to pave the way, to set an example, if that's the route you want to take, then that's something you'd follow. So it all depends on the individual's mindset. And I think following the path of our gurus is, again, it's just my view, is something that we all should aspire to do when we're in the working environment. Embracing other communities is one, being respectful of people's views and opinions, and then also looking at what can you offer, what is the gift that you can offer to the environment that you're working in, to set that example. So I think in order to achieve that, it is a difficult one, but it just depends on what you want to achieve and how you're going to achieve it. And I think from my perspective, it's dealing with things in a peaceful manner, respectful manner, being considerate of everyone's views and opinions, everyone's background, and then just setting that positive example of how to achieve something in a peaceful way is the route that I think is the best way.
Yes, but what's significant about those things, like the langar, it seems to be like nowadays, we go to the Gurdwara and we sit on the floor and we eat langar, and I take it for granted that we do that.
Yeah.
But in those days, when Guru Nanak Dev Ji first introduced it, that was a radical
It was because, again, it's an example where we're setting to say that that was the root of equality, in terms of saying, nobody's higher or lower, we all on the same playing level field. And when it comes to eating, we all have that basic right to food, to sustenance. And if somebody is going without, then we should, and we have something to give, we should offer our hand out to somebody and say, you can share what I have. So I think that is in terms of basing it on langar, the concept of langar has so many things there. I mean, historically, it's saying we offered a free kitchen, but if we go deeper, it offered people who couldn't afford food to have food. It showed people how to let go of their ego and not see themselves above somebody. So there's little pockets of elements of that one basic step of saying langar has just opened up a minefield of how we should treat each other when it comes to humility and respect.
And we talk about privilege, we talk about privilege a lot. And when langar was first introduced, those who were in the privileged class, for them, it must have been very uncomfortable, to humble themselves, to become humble and to sit on the floor and to use the same utensils as others, because they were not brought up that way.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, that just shows then what Sikh try to do in terms of bringing that acceptance of all communities sitting together and eating. A simple concept of eating has opened up so many ways of integrating communities together. I mean, we have like the local Gurdwaras now. Smetic, for example, they often share on their social media to say all are welcome to sit and eat in the Gurdwara, regardless of their community background, as long as they adhere to the respect in terms of taking their shoes off and keeping their head covered, and not being intoxicated or consumed any, cigarettes or drugs or whatever. So that kind of thing, again, is opening up sort of like a community hub to get people to sit together and eat, and just again, breaking down those barriers of understanding people from different backgrounds and being accepting of people from different backgrounds. You know, in terms of also, we could extend that onto the charities that we've got within the UK that are doing various things to help people that are on the poverty line, giving out food, setting up food banks. So the concept of Langar that's been initiated by Guru Nanak Dev Ji has just, you know, it's been a massive impact. And again, it's something that, you know, when it comes to leadership, is something that should be there as, you know, as an example of how leaders can support people they work with and people that they are responsible for as a manager. So there's lots of pockets there.
And I suppose, you know, even though like we live in a very different environment to the Punjab where Sikhi arose, but nevertheless the circumstances are very, very similar, because we could be in the Gurdwara and we could be sitting next to someone who's homeless, and it's like, well, yeah, you know, embrace that person simply, you know, just because they are facing misfortunes doesn't make them a lesser human being, right?
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with that 100%. I mean, I've done volunteer work in Midland Langar Seva, and we have so many service users who share so many different kinds of stories, and it really does open up your eyes. And it is right that if we are sitting with somebody who's going through some kind of turmoil, it doesn't mean that we are better than them, and it doesn't mean we turn our back on them either. We are there as a community. Our aim is to help others. If we have the ability, if we are in a stable environment ourselves and we see somebody else in an unstable environment, then it's our duty to help guide and support that individual.
So that, you know, that ritual of the Langar and Seva, it develops our empathy and our compassion, doesn't it?
Definitely. Yeah.
I think any leadership that's going to be sustainable needs to have that at its heart.
Yeah, I agree, definitely.
Okay. So it's not just about going to the Gurdwara and thinking.
No, it's not. It's the whole community thing, because I've got a close connection with the Smethwick Gurdwara. It's my local Gurdwara, and we do lots of community things, and I've got a good connection with the committee members and the president, and we've done lots of things over the years, and we've done especially things like health screening and things like that. We've done lots of issues, things like that, where we have the elderly come, and they don't necessarily want to use the service of the health screening. They just want somebody that will listen to them. So that's where I completely understand that it's not just going Gurdwara, you know, listening to a shabad and having Langar. It's the whole concept of integrating yourself within that community and providing help where it's needed.
Okay. Yeah. So let's go on to the symbols of Gurmukhi in the Shan Sahib. So let's start with Gurmukhi first of all. So with Gurmukhi, Guru Nanak Dev Ji and Guru Angad Dev Ji, they formalized Gurmukhi as a script for the Gurbani based on the Landa script. And you know, for me, this is, you know, it is innovation. They created something which didn't exist. They didn't use the existing Sanskrit, Farsi, Arabic that they knew very well. They created a new script, you know, so it kind of gave us an identity. We have our own script rather than a borrowed script. So there's the innovation, and when we see the khanda being the Nishan Sahib being raised, and you know, with the emblem of the khanda, that kind of, it symbolizes our heritage. You know, this is what our ancestors have struggled to claim the right to behave according to our own values in a Gurdwara. So as you said, you know, we have the right to say, look, you know, you can come into the Gurdwara as long as you're not intoxicated, as long as you're not smoking, and you take your shoes off, you're respectful, you adhere to the values. So that's part of our heritage. That's the safe space that we maintain. And the Kunda, for me, the Kunda represents activism, because it's about miri and biri and righteous action, the sword of righteousness, the sword of justice, as it were, the double-edged sword of justice. So how do we balance, the being innovative and at the same time maintaining our heritage, sustaining our heritage, and being active, supporting causes that are going to be ethical and make a better society? How do we do that? How do we navigate these different concepts of leadership?
I mean, I would say in terms of innovation, it's about looking at what our basic principles are in terms of what Sikhi is, in terms of earning an honest living, sharing what you have with others, and then reciting Bani. So those are the three things. And I think when it comes to innovation and looking at new ways of working and leading others, I think that should be at the forefront. Is that what people want to achieve? Is it an honest living? And those two words together really are quite strong, because it puts things, it puts you in sort of like puts things in perspective for you. And for me, it ensures that whatever step you take is done with integrity. So I would say, in terms of ensuring that you are innovative in anything you do, be it leadership, be it just work, whatever environment it is, if we were to have sort of like, a leadership guide based on the Sikhi principles, I would say those three things, like earning an honest living and sharing with others and dropping Naam, is key, and it keeps you on that straight path, and it also keeps you sort of away from the ego side of things, because you'll find that if you're progressing in a particular job role, or if you're working with difficult people, your ego can easily jump up quite high, and then the principles of Sikhi get lost. So if you constantly remember the two key things about earning an honest living, for me, that really does put your mindset in perspective day to day.
Yeah, because the heritage is part and parcel of our identity, and when we lose it, when we lose that heritage, it has an impact on our self-esteem. Like yourself, I've been brought up in England, and so in terms of my education, I wasn't taught anything about my heritage. Work that I've had to learn for myself, and the more I learn about it, the more self-confident I feel.
I agree. Because I've dealt with a few difficult sort of like, not difficult, but like sort of like bit hostile and bit difficult situations in work. And I think one of the things that allows me to sort of keep myself in check is my connection with Sikhi, because I'm not saying I know everything. I've still got a lot to learn, but the little bit that I do know, I do try and implement in my being as a day-to-day, as a person, in my approach to difficult situations, in my approach to hostility. And it does allow me to keep myself in check.
And I suppose with innovation, in order to be a leader in anything, we have to excel, and that excellence, there's usually innovation in that excellence, isn't there?
So being innovative it comes across in how you approach things and how you look at things. But I think it all just depends on how the individual sees things. But as long as they're grounded in their approach, again, that's where then you're linking leadership and what the Sikhi heritage, has created as a platform.
And I think when we look at the Kunda, like some people think that religion and politics don't go together, that we should leave politics out of religion. I think our faith is different in that respect.
Yeah.
It's not about, you know, they both have to go hand in hand.
Because it's like, I think it's people's individuals' interpretation of what politics means. It might mean politics from a government perspective, but I think for us, politics is about being a good leader and about supporting your community. So if you don't have that, then you don't really have the spiritual side, because the spiritual side isn't there just for you as an individual. Secure says, what can you do for others? What can you do to help others and set an example for others? And that's where the political element comes in. It's not about just you gaining all the knowledge and then your ego goes up. It's about, you've gained that knowledge, now how are you going to use it? And that's where the politics side comes into it, and using your knowledge in a positive way.
Yes, yes, absolutely. You know, that makes so much sense, because when we talk about seva, I think seva is a political act.
Yeah.
It's a political act. And a few years back, I decided to write a book about my Gurdwara in Stafford, the Sikh community in Stafford. And that was a political act, you know, because I wanted the elders who, from the 60s, they had, you know, it was 30 families, my family included, with the 30 families, they had pulled their resources together to start the Gurdwara, and it's thriving, it's flourishing. And so those people, like from the 60s, they're obviously very old, and a lot of them have passed on. So I wanted to write a book to recognize them, because, you know, who else is going to write a book about them? And so writing a book about a community, that is a political act. Well, it's like, they deserve to be recognized. And to say they deserve to be recognized, they deserve to be, you know, when you take photographs of people, you kind of like immortalize them, I suppose. You know, you've kind of made, like, even when they have passed on, the photograph is still there, you know, the memory is still there. So that is a political act, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So it's again, it's down to people's individuals' interpretation. And I think if that is clarified through sort of any future work that you do, it will give a better understanding to people, to say it's not politics in the sense of, you know, various political parties. It's politics in terms of how to be a good all-round leader.
Yeah. And everything is, as we say, everything is connected. So what we do in our own homes is reflected in what we do in our organizations, and you know, the wider society. And so so in terms of leadership, it's about being a leader with those that we feel a strong kinship with, but also being a leader with those that we are interconnected with, even though we may not feel a kinship with them.
Yeah.
And that's a skill. That's a skill that it takes quite a lot of effort to master.
I agree. Yeah, definitely.
And then the other side of it, though, you know, just to end with this, it's like we can feel that, you know, this kind of wide embrace of in embracing all of humanity. And then on the other side of it, how do we become trusted? You know, we can trust others, but how do we become trusted? For example, Maharaja Ranjit Singh, he was trusted by all the communities. And here in, you know, when we're working in a diverse organization where we may not be at the top rung of the power structure, how do we gain that trust? How do we gain that recognition when it doesn't come naturally?
I think it's through, I would say it's through showcasing what if we're looking at it from Sikhi, it's about showcasing what history has happened, is one. Also setting an example in terms of how we see ourselves to be as individuals, and not sort of getting roped into sort of things where your ego is too high, or where you're getting annoyed or you're getting angry. But I think the biggest thing is if we're following Maharaj Ranjit Singh, it's about showcasing that history, to people who aren't familiar with what Sikh history and ideology is about. And not many people do know. I mean, I know there's, when it comes to education, delivering education in universities, if you're doing history or if you're doing something on English or even art and media, very rarely will reference be made to people of color, regardless of what background, to say, you know, this is what they brought to those particular spectrums. It's about showcasing what
It's because they don't know, because the
yeah,
teachers don't know.
yeah,
So that's usually what the problem is.
yeah,
And then they will say, oh, well, you tell us. And it's like, well,
yeah,
you know, then the onus is put on the students to
yeah,
the curriculum. It's like, well, no, I want to learn. You know, I'm here
yeah,
to not to do
yeah,
your job.
yeah. So it is one of those, and I think we are slowly breaking the mold in terms of who we are as a, you know, as a community, in terms of what we're doing. I'd say in the last 5 years, in terms of being sort of like in the public arena for positive things, you know, there's been various sort of platforms created for Sikhs to showcase what they've been doing, especially during COVID pandemic, or if we've been hit with, like, you know, heavy snowfall or anything or like that. Slowly, you know, the Sikh community are showing what our heritage tells us to do in terms of being selfless. It is slowly coming to the forefront, and people are seeing that the Sikh community do pay a lot of respect and homage to the fact that selfless service is key, and if you can help someone, then help someone.
Yeah, and I suppose contribution is, you
Yeah,
know, goes hand in hand with leadership. The more we
yeah,
can contribute,
yeah,
the more we can be recognized for contributing.
yeah,
Then yeah, I suppose that kind of builds the reputation in spaces where we are not so well known.
yeah, definitely.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Narinder. That's been
Thank you.
wonderful,
Yes.
and yeah, very, very inspiring to hear you share your thoughts. Thank you.
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ 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 ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ